Is there an alien base on the moon? More and more people are coming forward with stories that might prove this is true. Rumors say that there is an alien moon base on the far side of the moon, the side we never see from Earth. Did you ever wonder why the moon landing stopped and why we have not tried to build a moon base? It does seem like a better and easier idea than a floating space station with no access to any raw materials or supplies. According to NASA astronaut Neil Armstrong, the aliens have a base on the moon and told us in no uncertain terms to get off and stay off the moon. Sound far-fetched? Milton Cooper, a naval intelligence officer, tells us that not only does the alien moon base exist, but the US naval intelligence community refers to that alien base as the Luna, that there is a huge mining operation going on there, and that is where the aliens keep their huge motherships while the trips to the Earth are made in smaller flying saucers. Alien base on the far side of the moon. It was seen in film by the Apollo astronauts, a mining operation using very large machines, and the very large alien craft described in sighting reports as motherships exist there. Milton Cooper. Did Apollo 11 encounter UFOs on the moon? From the book Above the Top Secret by Timothy Good. According to hitherto unconfirmed reports, with calls to their telephone answering services offering to help, both Neil Armstrong and Edwin Buzz Aldrin saw UFOs shortly after their historic landing on the moon in Apollo 11 on 21 July 1969. I remember hearing of the astronauts refer to a light in or on a crater during the television transmission, followed by a request from Mission Control for further information. Nothing more was found or heard. According to a former NASA employee, Otto Binder, unnamed radio was with their own VHF receiving facilities that bypassed NASA's broadcasting outlets, pick up by following exchange. NASA was there. Mission Control calling Apollo 11. Apollo, these babies are huge. Sir, enormous. Oh my god, you wouldn't believe it. I'm telling you, there are other spacecraft out there, lined up on the far side of the crater edge. They are on the moon watching us. In 1979, Maurice Chatelain, former chief of NASA Communications System, confirmed that Armstrong had indeed reported seeing two UFOs on the rim of a crater. The encounter was common knowledge in NASA, he revealed, but nobody has talked about it until now. Soviet scientists were allegedly the first to confirm the incident. According to our information, the encounter was reported immediately after the landing of the module, said Dr. Vladimir Azaza, a physicist and professor of mathematics at Moscow University. Neil Armstrong relayed the message to Mission Control that two large, mysterious objects were watching them after having landed near the moon module, but his message was never heard by the public because NASA censored it. According to other Soviet scientists, Dr. Alexander Kazantsev, Buzz Aldrin took color movie film of the UFOs from inside the module and continued filming them after he and Armstrong went outside. Dr. Azaza claims that UFOs departed minutes after the astronauts came out on the lunar surface. Maurice Chatelain also confirmed that Apollo 11 radio transmissions were interrupted on several occasions in order to hide the news from the public. Before dismissing Chatelain's sensational claims, it is worth noting his impressive background in the aerospace industry and space program. His first job after moving from France was as an electronics engineer with Convair, specializing in telecommunications, telemetry, and radar. In 1959, he was in charge of the electromagnetic research group, developing new radar and telecommunication system for Ryan, and one of his 11 patents was an automatic flights to the moon. Later, at North American Aviation, Chatelain was offered the job of designing and building the Apollo communications and data processing systems. Chatelain claims that all Apollo and Gemini flights were followed both at a distance and sometimes also quite closely by space vehicles of extraterrestrial original flying saucers, or UFOs, if you want to call them by that name. Every time it occurred, the astronauts informed Mission Control, who then ordered absolute silence. He goes on to say, I think that Walter Schirra aboard Mercury 8 was the first of the astronauts to use the code name Santa Claus to indicate the presence of flying saucers next to space capsules. However, his announcements were barely noticed by the general public. It was a little different when James Lovell, on board the Apollo 8 command module, came out from behind the moon and said for everybody to hear, please be informed that there is a Santa Claus. Even though this happened on Christmas Day, 1968, many people sensed a hidden meaning in those words. Rumors persist. NASA may well be a civilian agency, but many of its programs are funded by the defense budget and most of the astronauts are subject to military security regulations, apart from the fact that the National Security Agency screens all films and probably radio communications as well. We have the statements by Otto Binder, Dr. Gary Henderson and Maurice Chatelain that the astronauts were under strict orders not to discuss their sightings, and Gordon Cooper has testified to a United Nations committee that one of the astronauts actually witnessed a UFO on the ground. If there is no secrecy, why has this sighting not been made public? A certain professor who wished to maintain anonymous was engaged in a discussion with Neil Armstrong during a NASA symposium. "Professor, what really happened out there with Apollo 11? Armstrong, it was incredible. Of course, he had always known there was a possibility, and fact is we were warned off. There was never any question then of a space station or a moon city." "Professor, how do you mean warned off?" "Armstrong, I can't go into details except to say that their ships were superior to ours both in size and technology. Boy, were they big and menacing. No, there is no question of a space station." "Professor, but NASA had other missions after Apollo 11. Armstrong, naturally NASA was committed at that time and couldn't risk panic on Earth, but it really was a quick scoop and back again." Armstrong confirmed that story was true but refused to go into further detail beyond admitting that the CIA was behind the cover-up. We still can come across publications trying to find an answer to the question, are we alone in the universe? At the same time, presence of reasonable creatures has been detected just close to our home, in the moon. However, the discovery of the immediately classified as secret, as it was so much incredible that even could shake the already existing social principles. The video films and photos made by US astronauts during the Apollo program were demonstrated by the briefing, and people were extremely surprised by the materials. Had not been presented to the public earlier, and NASA specialists answered. It was difficult to forecast the reaction of people to the information that some creatures had been or still were on the moon. Besides, there were some other reasons to it, which were beyond NASA. Specialist for lunar artifacts Richard Hoagland says that NASA is still trying to wield photo materials before they are published in public catalogs and files. They do retouching or partially refocuses them while copying. Some investigators, Hoagland is among them, suppose that some extraterrestrial race had used the moon as a terminal station during their activity on the Earth. The suggestions are confirmed by the legends and myths invented by different nations of our planet. Apollo 10 astronauts made a unique picture of 1 mile long object called Castle, which is hanging at the height of 14 kilometers and casts a distinct shadow on the lunar surface. The object seems to be consisting of several cylindrical units and a large conjunctive unit. Internal porous structures of the castle is clearly seen in one of the pictures, which makes an impression that some parts of the object are transparent. When Apollo 12 crew landed on the lunar surface, they saw that the landing was observed by a half-transparent pyramidal object. It was hanging just several meters above the lunar surface and shimmered with all rainbow colors against the black sky. In 1969, when the film about astronauts traveling to the Sea of Storms was demonstrated, NASA finally understood what consequences such kind of control could bring. Astronaut Mitchell answered that question about the feelings after a successful return the following: "My neck still aches as I had to constantly turn my head around because we felt we were not alone there. We had no choice but to pray."
If you enjoy this video and want to see more like it, please consider subscribing to us and hitting the like button. Feel free to write a comment below and suggest which theory you want to see next. If you'd like to further support this channel, please consider joining. Our membership link will be found in the description box below. We appreciate your support, and as always, thanks for watching.